over the years, I've been able to see firsthand kind of the benefits of the different initiatives that Federation has here in Cleveland. And my parents have hosted participants from St. Petersburg when they came to Cleveland, and we were able to meet up with them over in St. Petersburg. So this is really a meaningful initiative to me. So I'm excited that you guys are all able to be here. And to start, we just wanted to hear from everyone, and just to go around the Zoom, introduce yourself, just tell us your name and why you joined us for this session today. So if anyone is feeling adventurous and willing to go first.
I can start. Do you want me to turn my camera on this? Okay. Oh, I can't. Sorry, it disabled that. But hi, everyone. My name is Melanie. I actually grew up with Lisa, and just like her, my parents immigrated here from Russia. So I just thought it'd be great if I could join this today.
Thanks, Mel. Anyone else feeling?
I can go. Hi, I'm Faye. I'm really excited to be joining this event. I've always been fascinated with Jews that emigrated from different places from the Soviet Union. Really excited to learn more.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. We're the Fieldmans, Allison and Matt. We spent from 2006 to 2007 in St. Petersburg, Russia, working for the Joint Distribution Committee. We were there with Vadim. It was very nice to spend time with him, get to know him a long time ago. And we're excited to be here with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you.
And it's a crazy morning in the Fieldman household, so we'll be off camera and muted.
That's okay.
I will go next. My name is Jonathan Niesenbaum. I unfortunately am having issues. Hi, Lior. I'm having issues with my camera today, so I'm trying to get that fixed. But I wanted to join this. I similarly have some family members that immigrated from Russia, and I'm just looking forward to hearing more about this.
Awesome.
I can go. My name is Yael. I actually moved to Cleveland about 2 years ago from Israel, and in Israel we have a huge Aliyah from Russia, and I'm interested in hearing more about it. Coming here.
Thanks, Yael. And yes, you guys can all definitely message in the chat as well if you're feeling camera shy.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I grew up here, and part of my family is from Russia and Belarus, but they came before it was the Soviet Union. But I've really been interested in this probably since I was twinned with a Soviet girl for my bat mitzvah, which was a long time ago.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Lappin. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Federation, and I have very vivid memories. My father, who's a rabbi, was extremely involved in the movement of Soviet Jewry when I was a child in the 80s, and spent a lot of time in the former Soviet Union. And so I'm always interested now to hear about the journeys that people have had, knowing a lot of the work that my father did many years ago.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. This is Ilya and Lana Bederman, and we immigrated from former Soviet Union, from Russia and Ukraine, respectively, almost 30 years ago, and we're glad to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley. I'm here because Jack invited me and because I just love learning about Jewish communities around the world.
Awesome.
Wait, and your cat name is?
My cat's name is actually Mezuzah, and she goes by Zuzzy. And she loves to participate in Zoom calls.
Does anyone else feel like I think we've gotten through mostly everyone. So thank you so much for introducing yourselves and again for being here today. YLD is committed to helping connect Jewish young adults in Cleveland with the work of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland with the work that the Federation does overseas in Israel, St. Petersburg, and beyond. So we do this in a variety of ways. One way is through events. We put on numerous events throughout the year. Some of our events include the Blue and White Party, which celebrates Israel's Independence Day, Zikaron Basalon, where we meet with a Holocaust survivor and hear their story, as well as Lehava, a program for young Jewish adults in St. Petersburg, Russia, where we, as young Jewish adults in Cleveland, get to learn from them about their initiatives in their local Jewish community, and we develop meaningful relationships. We hope to see you at these future events and to continue learning about our work. To help us succeed in our work, the Overseas Engagement Committee is fortunate to work hand in hand with the Overseas Department at the Federation. We quickly want to introduce Ilanit Gerblech-Kalir from the Overseas Department, who is here with us today. Ilanit, if you could wave, just so everyone can see you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining. The
Thank
Overseas
you
Department.
for doing this.
Yeah, the Overseas Department of Federation is engaged in direct work overseas, mainly in Israel and in St. Petersburg, Russia. The work is focused on making a sustainable impact in the lives of Israelis and in the lives of the Jewish community in St. Petersburg. In addition, part of the mission of the Overseas Committee is to connect individuals in Cleveland with Israelis to enrich and deepen our relationships. That is why I am thrilled that you have joined today. And thank you again, Ilanit, for being here today. Helping us with this initiative and many of our YLD overseas initiatives is our community shlicha. The shlicha is here to bring their experience from Israel and help us with programming, engagement, and bringing Israeli culture to Cleveland. For the past 2 years, we have been grateful to have Lior Gersht as our shlicha. Lior has been an integral part of our community and has brought so much, including Israeli cooking lessons and an event called Rasim Lezicharam, which is a run for Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Remembrance Day. Although Lior's time is coming to an end, we are very grateful for her and wish her all the best in her future endeavors. Before I introduce today's speaker, we want to hear from you again. This time you guys can just type in the chat, but we were just wondering if you could tell us at least one of the following questions. So, are you of Russian descent? Did you move with your family from one country to another during your lifetime? Do you have a favorite Russian dish or favorite music? And what is your favorite Russian word? So if you guys want to type in the chat. I'm just keeping up, sorry.
Lisa, what was the second or the third point?
Do you have a favorite Russian dish or
Russian
any
dish.
favorite Russian songs or music? Pirog. I don't know if I know what that is. Pilmeni. Love pilmeni. Borscht, yes. Vodka, that's a Russian staple. Vinaigrette. Vadim is showing on his screen pilmeni. Very good. Pirashki, always good. I love Russian chocolate. Saluyu, Alyssa, because I tell my grandma that at the end of every conversation that Alyssa has to overhear in our apartment. Thank you guys for sharing. I don't know if anyone else wants to share. Okay. So we are very pleased today to have Vadim Blumin with us. Vadim is an educator and social activist. He has such an impressive background, and I'm just going to share part of it. Vadim is the director of the Mandel Program for Excellence, a leadership program for returning shlichim, or emissaries, at the Jewish Agency for Israel. Previously, he was the content and training specialist of Makom, the Jewish Agency for Israel Education Lab. Prior to that, Vadim headed Jaffe's Education Department of St. Petersburg and Northwest Russia, and the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Vadim lives in Ramat Gan with his husband, Roman, and their daughter, Danielle. Vadim has been connected to our community and has come to Cleveland several times as an expert Israel educator. In addition, we worked closely with Vadim during the years he lived in St. Petersburg and served as a Jaffe shliach. Please join me in warmly welcoming Vadim. Vadim, the floor is yours.
Lisa, thank you so much for those kind words. Pleasure being with you. Thank you for joining. Yeah, I think it's one of the longest romance of my life, almost 14 years with St. Petersburg and Cleveland. Until now, the Federation Executive insisted on inviting me to Cleveland only when it's extremely cold and very snowy. But I hope some days to see Cleveland in summer as well. I imagine it's beautiful. Anyhow, I love the fact that we have this relatively intimate group, and I would like to encourage you as much as possible to open your cameras, and whenever you have a question or a thought, please do not hesitate. Write it down in the chat. I will stop during my presentation 2 or 3 times in order to address them and to allow you to participate. What I prepared for you are actually 2 personal stories and 2 stereotypes that I would like to share and explore together with you. So I would like to invite you, again, not to hesitate, and whenever you have a question or remark or just a thought, please do share it, whether in chat or just open your mic and say it out loud. I will claim that many of the issues that are relevant for Russian speakers in Israel are actually as much relevant in North America, especially in the States, and especially now. So that's the first request. And the second one, you know what, we'll wait for that later. Okay, so let's go. As I said, 2 personal stories and 2 stereotypes. Here we go. Story number 1. Now I am an Israeli. The year is 1990. The place is Dnipropetrovsk. Don't try to say it out loud. Actually, we are at a train station. I'm 11 years old, and anyone who I've ever met in my life is there on that train station, and they are all crying, literally weeping. Any guess why are they crying? What's going on? You're most welcome, open your mics or just write down in the chat. Again, 1990, train station, Ukraine, everyone is weeping. And the question is why? Why do they, what, if you had to guess, why are they crying? Because you were leaving home, Henry says, saying goodbye. Lisa is suggesting, yes, you're right. We were about to leave for Israel to make Aliyah. But wait, but isn't that a happy thing? You see, I think it's hard for us to imagine how fast technology changed during the last years. So I will ask you to imagine not only a world where we do not have internet, right? No WhatsApp, no Facebook, no Twitter, nothing. But moreover, staying in touch and communicating. And I think at least one of the participants in this call perhaps can share. During the 80s and the 90s, and of course earlier, people who were in touch with relatives or friends in the West, in the, whether Europe or United States or elsewhere, were actually in danger. They could lose their job, they could be kicked out of universities or school. So yes, we were leaving for Israel, making Aliyah, and people at the train station just didn't know if we would be able not only to see each other, but just to stay in touch. Perhaps I should, stop for a second and give you the prequel. You see, I'm a historian by training. I hated history in high school, but my first, second degree and my research is in Jewish history. So I actually researched and until I reached out until mid 16th century. I'm Jewish from all possible sides. On my mother's side, um, her maiden family name is Mazricher, and my grandfather, his name was Dov Ber. I don't know how much are you familiar with the history of Hasidic court, but Dov Ber from Mazrich was actually the second person who established after Baal Shem Tov, the one who established Hasidut. Now, that wasn't my grandfather, but it's clear that they arrived from that area. My grandmother was a doctor, a physician, and on the left side, there were all kinds of doctors crying and weeping. On my dad's side, well, one was my grandmother on my father's side was a teacher. My dad is engineer. Now, another guess for you. He worked at the radio factory, right? Engineer working in radio factory. Any guess what was produced in Soviet Union at a radio factory? Ilanit is trying her luck. All right, where's someone in the chat? I'm guessing it's not radios. Yes, right. That's a good guess. No idea, something connected. Yes, something connected to military, exactly. Oh wait, we have another guess and then we go on. Surveillance. Well, not that I know, but that's a good guess. I asked Dad. I don't know if you recall, but in the 90s, there were Gulf War when there were missiles sent from Iraq towards Israel. Well, those missiles were made in my dad's factory, right, the Scud. Anyhow, because he was, creating weapons, and we wanted to leave Katyusha rockets. Oh, you're almost there. So anyhow, because he was working in a military secret mif'al, Leo, help me out, mif'al or Ilanit? Factory, thank you, yeah. He had to leave his job, and the natural thing for someone who did that until now was, yes, you're right, I'm not even asking to guess, he became for the last 5 years, in order for us to be able to leave Soviet Union, the managing director of the opera and ballet, the local opera and ballet theater. So besides the doctors, there were the opera singers and the ballerinas. The opera singers were crying much louder than all the rest of them. And there was another group, I must tell you, for me, being a Jew in Soviet Union, in Ukraine, was quite exciting. I'll give you an example. I remember one day I came to my, public day school, and a friend of mine, her name was Katya, or still is Katya, she said, listen, don't come to school tomorrow. And I asked her why, and she told, well, my dad and his friends are organizing a pogrom. That sounds exciting. I went back home. I figured out that my dad has a weapon. My baby sister then was 3 years old. My parents said, no one will make us stay at home and be scared. Mom and your sister will accompany you to the school. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar. There are those trolleys, right? When the infant or the toddler sitting down, and beside, like on the back side of the trolley, there's a small pocket. So my mom hid a butcher knife, with a real hand and then a big sharp part. And I remember walking, the same road from my home to the school with my mom, bless you, Rachel, with that knife. And I imagine her taking the knife and slaughtering Cossacks or something. So being Jew was quite exciting. And several months later, a first Jewish school was established in my hometown. So clearly I wanted to go, I was curious. And on the first day at that school, we were allowed to choose our own names. Now, I don't know how much are you familiar with the principles of Soviet education, but free choice wasn't one of them. So the fact that we were allowed to choose our own names were overwhelming, and more so, like the next week, etc., I realized that we were giving grades based upon our questions and not our answers. It was, it blew my mind. So back to the train station, we left Soviet Union, we left Ukraine, came to Israel, and I had so much fun in that Jewish schools that when we arrived, I said in Israel, you know what, I also want to go to a Jewish school. And, in Israel, when you say Jewish school, it means, right, a religious school. So I think at the second week, they realized that I knew a bit Hebrew and that I studied it for 6 months in a Jewish day school. So the natural thing to do was to send me to the National Bible Quiz. Now, the Israelis on this call who are familiar with Chidon Tanakh know it's a huge deal. An invitation, I remember it was written, the prizes will be given by the Ministry of Education and the Israeli president. So naturally, I realized that I should be dressed properly. A day in a Jewish religion's Israeli school begins with what? Come on, guys. This is an easy yes. Mariv, wait. Henry, wait. Yes, I'm waiting. Go ahead. The other one, yes. What's his name? Come on, Harry. Mincha. No, and another one before that. Lenit, anyone else? Shacharit. Yes. Yes. Well done. Yeah. So it begins with a prayer. Now it's a regular, classroom. Just they put a Torah scroll in there. So anyhow, I'm 11 years old. And on the same day, because I realized I have to be properly dressed, I wore my 3-piece suit, my special glasses, and went to school. Like Lior is laughing, but I don't know how many of you actually saw how Israeli kids dress for school, including the religious Zionists. Anyhow, the moment I enter the synagogue, right, the classroom, I think no one was able to actually daven. They were bursting they were laughing so hard. And by the end of the Shacharit, one of the kids is still my friend. His name is Avishai. He probably felt bad, so he approached and said, listen, it's a little bit awkward, but you have to, like, Israelis, we don't dress up like that. And I don't know where I had the nerve or the chutzpah, whatever it came from. I just looked back at him and said, well, Avishai, now I am an Israeli, and this is the way I dress. This is me and my baby sister week before we left, and this is not, those are not the special glasses. Now, I'd like to stop for a second. I love to leave the story as it is, but there are 3 things I'd like to emphasize. A, as an 11 years old kid, it was clear to me that now I'm an Israeli. This is my home. I'm part of this place and I belong. I don't need permission from anyone, right? There's a very deep sense of belonging. This is my home. Now I'm an Israeli. But moreover than that, not only I'm a Jew and I'm an Israeli, but I'm allowed to change stuff. Like, okay, you dress like that and I dress differently and that's fine. Wait, let me stop now. As promised, I look at the chat. Thank you, Leah. Yeah, I'm not sure my sister will be happy that I'm showing this picture. Yeah, I might disclaimer now, she looked much better in the last series of Fauda. But yeah, that's also, yeah. All right, if you have any remarks or thoughts, write them down in the chat. I'm going further to the second story. You tell him, the year is 2010, the place is St. Petersburg, much easier to pronounce. And this is the 4th year of me serving as a Jewish agency emissary in St. Petersburg. I must tell you, the last time you left, the 11 years old kid with the 3-piece suit, etc., and the awful glasses. I finished the religious school. Most of my friends went to yeshiva. I remember my mom going to the head of the yeshiva and saying, listen, He's playing violin, he's dancing ballet, he's learning chess and astrophysics. And the rabbi said that will work perfectly because we have the Kodesh learning, right? Learning the religious subjects until 1 o'clock. And since 1 o'clock is the other things we learn, and he can be, you know, released from that. And my parents asked, what are the other things? And they said, well, you know, math, English, geography, stuff like that. And I think it's the only time in my life that my parents insisted and made me not to go to the yeshiva. So I could be a yeshiva bucher now, married with 13 kids. Anyhow, so that didn't happen. I finished my high school, served the army at the IDF intelligence, and then went to Hebrew University, learning international relations. And as I told you previously, history, etc. It's not interesting at all. However, at some point, both during my service and then later, a couple of friends of ours, we established nonprofit NGO working with youth at risk. To tell the truth, at the beginning, we thought we will be developing an NGO that will be working on leadership development, because it was clear that there are hundreds of thousands of youth that made Aliyah that now lives in Israel, and they have no social and cultural platform to grow. And that's what we started. And gradually, we realized that the situation on ground is far, you know, very much different from what we imagined. Anyhow, to tell a long story short, we had at our peak, before I left for St. Petersburg, 8 branches all over Israel, working together with Ministry of Education and Absorption and Welfare, etc. And when I arrived to St. Petersburg, it blew your mind. I hope some of you are aware of the amazing partnership through the Jewish Agency and the connection between Cleveland and St. Petersburg. It's truly an empire, and it is wonderful to see Matt and Alison. And we back then we were just, you know, young couple with no kids, and it's really moving to see how our path and our Jewish journey continues. And I'm very happy to see and to hear you here in this conversation as well. And you saw remarkable Jewish local community with day schools and all kinds of educational and cultural projects. But the jewel of the crown were undoubtedly the summer camps, the winter camps, summer camps, etc. And until now, I think anyone you will ever meet who has to do anything with professional Jewish Russian-speaking life usually started their journey in the summer camps, because it's a unique experience that allows you immersive, transformative educational framework. And this, 2010, the last summer of the 4th year of me being the head of education department there. And it's happened, we're talking about hundreds of teenagers. There are, 3 different groups. And this was, the eldest, 15, 16 years old. Most of the buses already left. This was the last bus. And as usual, there's, one kid that was late, and he was running with his dad towards the bus. The kid got up, the father apologized through the back, in the truck, and approached me heavily breathing and saying, listen, I'm so sorry we're late. We had no time. And, because everything was last minute, we didn't have the time to tell him. So you tell him, right? Now, I thought that I know what he was talking about, but I had to make sure. And I asked him, shall I tell him what? And he told me, well, you tell him he's Jewish. The end of second story. Now, I think I want to stop this second story here and ask the question, what happened in those 20 years, right? 1990, 2010, right? When 11 years old kid coming to Israel and feeling clearly that I'm an Israeli now, I'm Jewish, I'm an Israeli. And 20 years later, 16 years old kid going to a Jewish agency summer camp, not knowing he's a Jew. And you have to understand that now 30 years after the big Aliyah, the big waves of Soviet Jewry that came to North America and to Israel, they are the Russian speakers in Israel. So in the, 15 minutes remaining, I'd like to share some of, my understanding throughout two stereotypes that left. This piece of art is by Zoe Cherkassky, another representative of Generation 1.5 artist. She's the only one that actually received the enormous honor of having her own exhibition at the Israeli Museum in Jerusalem. So, Russian speakers in Israel. Let's start. By the way, if you have any thoughts or questions or anything, please, I remind you, please write them down in the chat, and noticed what Leah just wrote regarding the partnership between Cleveland and St. Petersburg, etc. So in numbers, okay, we are talking about something around 1.5 million of Russian speakers in Israel, right? This is 20% of the Jewish population. And well, yeah, following Matt, thank you for writing this down. You see, Matt is writing down how common that is. And you have to understand, those of you who are interested in education, this is fascinating, right? If you're an educator and you have in your summer camp, I know 1/3 or even more kids wearing a cross, right? And they have one Jewish grandmother and one Christian grandmother. And for them, Jews are there. They are the Jews, not us, right? So how do you create an educational framework that allows someone to check their and to explore their own identity? And nowadays, when we have much more mixed families, when parents coming from all kinds of different backgrounds, how do you allow educational framework that is inclusive, that is welcoming, that is not judgmental, etc.? It's really fascinating. So wait, back. Thank you, Matt, for that remark. So Russian speaking Israel. We're talking about 1.5 million, 20%, right? 20%, by the way, you know how will you remember 20%? Usually 20% is what you remember from any lecture you participate in. Usually in Zoom, it's less. But anyhow, let's hope 20%, 20% of Jewish population in Israel. Second thing, we are not Russians. Now, that's something that happened all over the world. The Russians are coming. Usually when I present myself, I say that I was born last century in country not existing anymore. Now, the idea or understanding that countries can cease to exist, and not because someone was shooting missiles on them or there was a war, something decayed, and it's a long conversation why Soviet Union collapsed. But anyhow, I was a Soviet kid. On no point in my life I had a Ukrainian identity. I was a Soviet Jewish kid, and so we became Russians only when we came to Israel. What happened, I think, in many cases to Soviet Jewry who came to the States as well. We won't do a geography lesson now. It's extremely boring, but bear in mind that Soviet Union was the largest country in the world, and it consisted from different 15 republics. Now, you can say that Ukrainian, Belarus, and Russia, somehow similar, or we pass as Russians. But when you look at the Asian part of Soviet Union, or Armenia, Georgia, all the stans, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc., or you look at the Far East, they are very, very different. And I'm guessing perhaps in Cleveland, you also can meet families from Bukhara or Kavkaz. How do you say Kavkaz in English? It probably sounds different. No idea. All right, I'll look it up and send it later. Yeah, but they are not Russians. So if there's anything you recall, first of all, we are Jewish, right? We're Russian-speaking Jewish, and I think in the in this generation, Russian thinking, perhaps Jewish. All right, but let's start and generation 1.5. Generation 1.5 is actually a sociological term created by American sociologists that claim, yeah, thank you, Lanit, for saying, I know this is how you write it, but I wonder how you say it. Like, what is the?
Caucasus. Jews from the
Wow.
Caucasus. Yeah.
I had no idea that that's how you say it. Thank you so much. So generation 1.5, it's in the sense that, you know, most of you, while presenting yourself, address the fact that some of your ancestors immigrated. They came to America from Belarus, from Russia, some, you know, recent Jewish history from Israel or other parts of the world. If you ask them, why did they move? Why did they immigrated? Usually, and those of you who speak Russian on this conversation, I think our parents will say, ради детей, right? For the sake of our kids. Because usually the first generation who makes Aliyah, who makes, you know, this move of moving somewhere else, pays the highest price. You know, people who immigrate, usually the older generation, they will never be able to restore the social status or to be culturally, you know, local. There will be always, you know, something between the lines that they miss. But they will always say, you know, my kids, they will be Canadian, they will be Americans, they will be Australian, they will be Israelis, right? And what the American sociologist suggested is that if a kid, like in my case, right, makes the move during elementary school, they're not exactly second generation. They're not, you know, they will be natives, they will be locals. We are a generation and a half, right? We have one leg in our country of origin and one leg in the new, you know, homeland, right? It's clear to me that Hebrew is my home, Israel is my home, but I insist that my name is Vadim. Well, if you remember the first story, I did choose a second name, second Hebrew name, I must still use it, but everyone knows me as Vadim. I insist my daughter will speak Russian and read. We negotiated. The last achievement is that we read one evening in Hebrew, a preferred language by her, and the second one Russian. So we are not ashamed, by our origin, but rather see it as an asset, which is not, it's not. It's a process. I think for the first 10 years in Israel, I was making huge efforts to become an Israeli, to make sure that I won't pass. No one will see that I'm, Russian speaker. And only after I was Israeli enough, I allowed myself to start and be a Russian speaking Jew. Now let's play the stereotypes game. As promised, please, you don't have for the next 15 minutes be politically correct. You're most welcome to either open your mics or write down in your chat. I see already someone does. Oh, great. PhDs, all right. Smelly, very good, Ilanit. Thank you very much giving an example. Now, yes. Jacob, you're smiling. Clearly there's something in your mind. You're allowed to say it out loud or write it down. Leah, I see. Artistic, good chess players, hardworking, wonderful. Lisa? Lior, Jack, Anna, Lisa, you're also allowed to play. Mathematicians, wonderful. Weird. That's the first time anyone wrote that. That's wonderful. Impolite, opinionated, wonderful, smart. Thank you, Aviv. Grandma lives at home. Wonderful. Oh, you're so good. Well, everything is true, but yeah, loud. Thank you, Anna. That's only in Moscow. Yes, in St. Petersburg, it's a difference. Sleazy. Jacob, you're hanging out with the wrong Russians. Wait, that's wonderful. Blunt and serious. Oh, you're wonderful, guys. All right. Look, we could create an hour-and-a-half session just going one by one through your stereotypes, and you're very kind and wonderful. I wanted to address one of the harshest stereotypes regarding Russian-speaking Jews in Israel. I don't know if that's the case in Cleveland or in the States, but this is the case in Israel. All the Russians are Gentiles, right? We're not Jewish at all. And you see, the generation 1.5 was the last group that we established. It all started in 2011. I don't know if you recall, but in 2011, there was a huge protest movement in Israel at the Rothschild Boulevard. And, young people our age, your age, the young generation in Israel were demanding social justice. It started as an economical protest and went through and, swept Israel away. And the mass media, when covering the protest, asked, where are the Russians? I don't know, maybe, because we came without the bears and balalaikas or whatever, but we were there and we met, our colleagues, people I saw in the summer camps or in the nonprofit NGOs and others. And so we felt that we are part of the values and the things that people were protesting against, but we were a bit different. We didn't fit in. So what we decided to do is to open a closed group on Facebook. And for almost, few good years, for almost 3 years, we were discussing amongst ourselves all kinds of stuff. And the thing that made us go out from our closed Facebook group to, and to take a stand and to create this activism we're involved ever since, happened on April 14th, 2013. Now, you probably know, especially with the project that Lior created in Cleveland, etc. A day before the Independence Day of Israel, there is the Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers. And there's this tradition in the IDF, in the Israeli army, that the head of the IDF goes and pays the last respect for the last fallen soldier. In 2013, the last fallen soldier was Eugene Tolochko, Zhenya Tolochko. He made Aliyah. His father was Jewish, his mother not. So when he paid the highest price, he gave his life for this country. He was buried outside the fence, and the head of IDF didn't pay him the last respect. And when we heard that, we felt that we can no longer be silent. And the thing that we did, we just, go and put the small flag on his grave. This is Eugene. This is his face and his story in Hebrew. I'm sorry, it's not translated. This is the official site, memorial site. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the law of return, but the law of return is actually the state law of Israel that allows immigrants from all around the world to come and become an Israeli. It's a mirror reflection of the Nuremberg law, right? The Nazi law. The young Israel state said that morally, we would like to be the shelter, the Jewish homeland for all those who would, find themselves in the gas chambers. So you can become an Israeli citizen and serve in the army without being halachically Jewish. And it's true, it's a huge issue. Since year 2000, almost 60% of Russian-speaking Jews who are coming to Israel are not halachically Jewish, but they are citizens. And this situation that, they're second-rate citizens, they cannot marry or be buried or even given, this last respect. And we felt that something had been to be done. And that's how we started our activity. And ever since, and it goes without saying, but this has nothing to do with the rabbinate. It's not a religious act. But we have, our chief rabbis saying out loud that immigrants from Soviet Union, we are religion-hating Gentiles. And this is a state official, right? He receives his salary from our taxes. I won't read it out loud. It makes me so angry and frustrated. But what gives me hope is the fact that after we went out with that picture that you saw, it went viral. Now, when I was a kid, viral was something you take a pill and you lay in bed. Nowadays, I understand viral is a good thing. All right. So anyhow, it went viral, and the idea, yeah, I'm that old. I told you I was born last century. So it went viral, and the IDF changed its regulations. Now, I don't know, could you imagine what can make the USA Army change its regulation? IDF did in a very awkward way. I think it's, well, there's still work to be done. Nowadays, if the last fallen soldier is not halachically Jewish, the head of IDF will go and put a small flag on a two graveyard, right? One a kosher soldier and one, not halachically one, which I think is problematic, but still, it's a beginning. It's a beginning. And there was another fight that we fought. One of our establishers, Jennifer, I won't go into details, but because this issue of recognizing our Jewry and our Jewish roots, there are many cases, Russian-speaking women are going through conversion, whether in order, to get married or just because they want, to convert authentically and honestly. And one of the women on our team, on our activist group, did that. She converted, and during the last part, I don't know if you're familiar with the halachic process, but the last stage of your conversion is going down and entering the mikveh, right? And when she was naked in the mikveh, went out and was harassed, she openly shared her story with the mass media, and three things happened. One, her parents started to receive phone calls that was trying to say that the rabbinate will annulate her conversion, which again, halachically impossible. Secondly, more and more women felt, comfortable enough, and this is long before Me Too movement, to share and say what happened to them. And thirdly, she got amazing support by the women of the Zionist religious movement. Figures like Rabbanit Malka Piotrkowski and others. And here again, when we went out with the story, those three, well, she called them rabbis, they weren't rabbis, they were Dayanim, never mind. They were convicted and no longer will be able to take any part in any process of the rabbinate. Yeah, this is the story that Jennifer shared. Wait, I'll stop now to look at the chat. Yes, Joanne Davis writes that that's so hateful. It sounds like he has no understanding of what Soviet Jews endured and being able to. Yes, thank you for writing this down. And I think one of the things that's important for us to stress out is that we have a unique and very powerful Jewish identity. Throughout the 70 years of communism, I saw through my parents, my grandparents, it's a unique story that until now very rarely is told, starting with the Holocaust memory, right? You have a huge numbers of Jewish officers in the Red Army. So for Soviet Jewry, the memory is not only of us being victims, but of us saving the world, literally. We saved the world, we, the Red Army. We fought and we saved the world from the Nazi, from the Nazi Germany. And in that sense, yes, there were Babi Yar, there were other awful, stories of Holocaust in the territories of Soviet Union, but the narrative is somewhat different. And the same with the Jewish identity, having very strong one, but rather cultural one, right? That is not necessarily going through a synagogue or requests a gatekeepers that will allow us. And it's overwhelming because, I'm privileged to be an educator for almost 20 years, working with, Birthright, Masa, Onward Israel, throughout the world, from Australia through the Soviet Union, European states. And when I had the conversations with young adults from all around the world, it was overwhelming to hear that all of them, no matter where they're coming from, reported that when they go to a local synagogue or community, etc., they're giving the sense that they're not good enough Jews, that they perhaps don't know where exactly in the Siddur we are, or they're not doing something correctly, etc. And I think in many cases, you see until now in Israel, whenever there is an article about Russian-speaking Jewry, there will be, first of all, a photograph of us getting down the stairs from the airplane. Guys, come on, it's 30 years. We're 1.5 million. Remember the 20%? We got off the plane already, right? And we are Israelis. And I think the rabbinate monopoly over who is a Jew and who is left out the big blue tent. And I must admit that we have wonderful partners, both in the reform and the conservative movements and in secular movements in Israel, who are taking the Jewish identity very seriously and fighting in order for Israel to be more inclusive and to do something with that, monopoly of the rabbinate. All right, to go on with something more pleasant and positive, I'd like, please take a look at the next video. And this is our last, the second stereotypes. We are the best Aliyah. Please take a look.
חלף דור. הפרטנר שלי רודיון לוקח אותי לפגוש קבוצת אקטיביסטים רוסיים שהתארגנו בזמן המחאה החברתית. אלא שהמחאה של קבוצת דור וחצי קצת אחרת. מה זה דור וחצי?
כשהלכתי לפה אז ביקשו ממני להגיד כאילו לאן את הולכת, מה אתם עושים, מה זה דור וחצי, הקבוצה שלנו. אז אמרתי, אתם יודעים מה, אנחנו לא נחמדים. כמו שיש לא נחמדים המזרחים, גם אנחנו לא נחמדים. כי הדור הראשון של ההורים שלנו היו דווקא נחמדים. הם ספגו את הכל, הם שרדו פה וזה, ואנחנו כבר לא נחמדים.
אנחנו מדברים רוסית, אנחנו אוהבים את השפה שלנו, אנחנו אוהבים את התרבות שלנו, אנחנו לא רוצים לוותר עליה בשום פנים באופן. אבל אנחנו ישראלים. ואנחנו רוצים שיקבלו אותנו ככאלה. אנחנו רוצים שלא נסו להכניס אותנו לשום כור היתוך.
אז לאיזה עם אתם שייכים?
אנחנו שייכים לעם ישראל, אבל אנחנו גם משמרים את הייחוד הרוסי. אנחנו לא מתביישים בזה שאנחנו עושים. אנחנו לא...
מישהו אמר לך לא לשמר את הייחוד הרוסי?
כן, כן. לא לדבר רוסית במקומות העבודה, וההורים שלנו קיבלו את זה הרבה יותר כשהם באו, כשאמא שלהם עבדה בקופת חולים, אמרו לה אל תדברי פה רוסית, וזה טראומה שיש לה עד עכשיו. כשניסו לעברת את השמות, זה טראומה שאולי הדור המבוגר חי אותה יותר, וזה נמצא אצלו יותר, אבל גם אנחנו חטא.
אגיד לכם משהו, אני רואה לפניי חבורה נהדרת של אנשים. איזה אידיוט, או כמה אידיוטים, במדינת ישראל, אמרו להם שהם צריכים להתבייש ברוסית שלהם, שכל בלונדינית היא זונה, אנחנו מכירים את כל הדברים האיומים, שכל מיני אידיוטים משמיעים, והחבורה הנהדרת הזאת נורא נעלבה. נעלבתם? מה קרה?
אני לא קונה את הסיפור הזה של כמה תפוחים רקובים. זה לא ככה. יש פה אווירה של חוסר סובלנות תרבותית, שהיא מושרשת בישראליות הזאת שאנחנו מדברים עליה. זה לא כמה אידיוטים. זאת הנורמה. זאת הנורמה במדינה הזאת.
אתם מסכימים איתו?
למה המחאה שלנו לא לגיטימית בעיניך?
אני אסביר לך למה. אתם העלייה הטובה ביותר שהייתה אי פעם מכל העליות שהיו במשך 100 השנים האחרונות.
כולל היקים.
איך אתה מגדיר טוב? מה זה טוב בעיניך?
מיליון בני אדם באו הנה ונקלטו. נקודה.
איך אתה יודע שהם נקלטו?
רגע, מה זאת אומרת נקלטו? אתה יודע ש...
נקלטו, יש להם מקומות עבודה, הם מתקדמים.
אבל איזה מקומות עבודה?
78% מדוברי רוסית שעובדים, או שהם לא עובדים, או שהם בתת תעסוקה. 78%, זאת קליטה? אם אנחנו מדברים 50% מכל עובדי הקבלן הם דוברי רוסית, זאת קליטה טובה? ככה אתה מודד קליטה, אחוז המסיימים בגרות בקרב דוברי רוסית הוא נמוך ביותר, רבע נושרים, זאת קליטה טובה?
אחוז ההתאבדויות הגבוה ביותר בקרב בני הנוער.
כל ההורים שלנו שהיו צווארון לבן שם, עורכי דין, רופאים, מה, כמו שאת כתבת, שהפכו להיות צווארון כחול, אני תמיד אומרת, שואלים אותי איך עליתי לבד, ואני שמחה שההורים שלי לא עלו אחריי. מה, אני מסוגלת לראות את האמא שלי פרופסורית בקונסרבטוריה, מנקה איפשהו, לא מוכנה.
שאומרים לכם ציונות, אז אתם צוחקים, זורקים תפוחי אדמה רקובים או מה?
כששואלים אותי מה זה ציונות, אני באמת ובתמים לא יודעת על מה אנשים מדברים.
את מדברת ברצינות שאת לא יודעת מה זה ציונות?
לגמרי. נכון, בשנות ה-20 או whatever, הציונות הייתה להגיע לארץ ולבנות ולהיבנות. אבל מה זה עכשיו? אנחנו עכשיו תקועים פה, כולנו ביחד, ואנחנו מנסים לעשות את המדינה הזאת, את המקום שבו אנחנו חיים, למקום יותר טוב, זהו, נקודה.
בלי לאבד את הייחודיות שלנו.
למה בעצם לא לחזור למולדת שלכם?
זאת יכולה להיות אופציה, אני בינתיים לא בחרתי באופציה הזאת, אבל אני לא שוללת את זה, אני גם לא חושבת שזה צריך להיות כאילו מושא לגינוי.
תראה מה זה, אנחנו יושבים פה שעה, ואתה כל הזמן מטיל ספק בהשתייכות שלנו, בזכות שלנו להיות פה, האם אתם ישראלים, האם אתם ציונים, הייתם בצה"ל, האם אתם מתכוונים לרדת, אבל סליחה על השאלה, אבל מי אתה? אתה יותר ישראלי ממני? יש לך יותר זכות להיות פה? אני פחות טוב ממך?
אני לא יודע, אני שואל אותך.
התשובה שלי היא לא. זאת המדינה שלי, פה אני גדלתי, אני לא חייב לך הסברים.
Now, no?
חלף דור.
Now, I don't know what you thought, and I apologize. I know you're not used to reading subtitles. I hope it worked fine. Look, I must admit that this movie, those of you who speak Hebrew, etc., it's available online. It's called The New Israelis. And this guy, well, he almost, the Israeli, I don't know, Larry King, may he rest in peace. Right? He's Mr. Television. And until this interview, you know, everyone in Israel is Israeli and something else. Israeli and Moroccan, Israeli and Yemenite, Israeli and Polish, Hungarian, whatever. So, all right, we are Israelis and Russian originals, Russian speaking. All right, it's quite banal. But when this journalist went bananas, hearing that we're insisting talking Russian with our kids, or want to preserve the culture of our parents, and he felt comfortable or natural to ask, so why don't you go back to your country? I realized that perhaps even now in 2021, we have still a work to do. And so besides, you know, the fight for, you know, our civil rights, as we started in the, you know, the middle of our conversation about conversion and the army service and being able to get married and buried in our own country as a citizens, we started to work on the cultural, you know, bridges, building the cultural bridges. And the first thing we did was the hardest thing to explain for American Jewry. You probably recognize this thing as a Hanukkah bush or a Christmas tree or a Sylvester. The only Sylvester I was familiar with was a cat, right? Whatever we celebrated as Soviet Jews was Novi God. Guys, help me out in the chat. How would you translate Novi God? You see in the chat? New Year. Thank you, Matt. Right? So it's a secular celebration. It has nothing to do with, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, you're all wonderful. So yeah, Novi God, New Year. It's a secular celebration. I would even claim that it's almost a Soviet Jewry Passover night. Right? It was the only holiday during the Soviet time, during the Soviet regime, that has nothing to do with the communist or the Soviet ideology. It has nothing to do with the doctrine or indoctrination or everything. It was, as a kid, I remember it's a bright holiday with presents and good food and all the family sitting around the table, listening to good music, eating the wonderful food, going back to, you know, the beginning, what Lisa asked you to write down in the chat. And we literally created a site. You can go on, it's still operating, Novi God Israeli, Israeli New Year, telling the history, how you should create the tree, pictures that people send, you know, from their childhood, etc. And this is a short video that tries to show that we're not celebrating Sylvester.
Bye.
What the rabbis think that I'm doing. What the rabbis are thinking I'm doing, the army. What the police thinks that I'm doing.
מים בטעמים?
מה מים? אתה כולך שיכור.
זה מים בטעם וודקה. ומה אני באמת עושה בנובגוד?
Sorry. Sorry.
רוצים לדעת מה באמת קורה בנובגוד? תבואו לחגוג איתנו בנובגוד
You want to
ישראל.
know what really happens in Novigod? Come and celebrate with us. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Mimuna, which is a Moroccan holiday that became totally Israeli. Every Ashkenazi Israeli who has a Moroccan friend looks for someone to be invited and to celebrate Mimuna. That's what we wanted. We created this site and said, come and celebrate with us. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis wanted, to come and to celebrate. We had more people who are willing to come and, celebrate with us than the homes that were willing to open, but we continued. Now, the pilmeni and the food you mentioned at the beginning, this is not a product placement. Because actually you cannot buy the book, it's all sold out. This is the first and the only Hebrew-speaking cookbook that is called Hever HaTe'amim, the Commonwealth of Tastes. I'm one of the authors, there were 4 of us. It's memoirs and recipes from the Jewish Soviet cuisine. We, for 4 years they tried to convince me to write it. I said, listen, the one who eat borscht or pilmeni knows the recipe, and those who don't, why should they? They will never eat our food. You probably saw online, Israelis or American tasting a Russian food. It's very funny, videos. And I really didn't think that anyone would want to buy it. We went to create Head Start, which is Israeli Kickstart. We were, this is the book, bestseller for almost 3 months. You cannot, this is a rare thing. You cannot buy it any longer. And the only criticism that we got, that it's kosher. Because people like, Russian-speaking Jews said, come on, how can you make a Russian Jewish cuisine kosher? And well, we managed that. That's a different story. It was important for us to build the bridges. We always, so this is the original way, like the pilmeni you mentioned. Pilmeni, every culture in the world has its own version of, isn't it dim sum or tortellini? So you can eat it with sour cream, which is the less kosher version, or just with vinegar and pepper. But it was another attempt, besides the New Year, the Novigod, to create those cultural bridges. And so the last thing I want to share with you is a question mark, is a question that I have regarding the next step of Israeli society and the identity politics. I find that we moved from the melting pot ideology towards multiculturalism. You have the Ethiopian Israelis celebrating Sigd, or the Russian-speaking Israelis celebrating Novigod, or the Moroccans celebrating Mimuna, right? To each its own, or live and let live. But I wonder, how can we maintain the solidarity, and what connects us as Israelis, as Jews? How can we be able to celebrate together, to mourn together, to create something that still binds us and accept each other? It seems that many of the subcultures or communities in Israel who suffer themselves from prejudice and looking for their own pride, looking in somewhat, I wouldn't say racist. Racism is a very harsh word. In different prejudice to the other groups. I hope you're all familiar with the 4 tribes paradigm of President Rivlin. So I wonder, what should we do next as Generation 1.5? What are the next battles or the fights that we fight in order for Israel to become closer to what we all hope it to be? So this is from me. You're most welcome to stay in touch, and I'll stop the share now. I'm sorry for going a little bit longer, but I really welcome your remarks, thoughts, or questions now.
Thank you so much, Vadim. Thank you for sharing your story, and we can now open it up for a question and answer Q&A. So I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions. I know if you guys want to send it in the chat, if you want to send it to me or Jack privately, we can ask it, or if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
You see Matt and Allison.
There's one question.
Chat.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Eleni. Go ahead.
No, Matt and Allison have a question in the chat that says to talk about Alexander Navalny and the freedom movement in Russia.
Yes. Look, I have no understanding in politics whatsoever. One of the stereotypes that usually people are writing down about Russian speakers is that we are all extremely conservative in the States, in Israel, wherever. And it's a stereotype. I think it's like all stereotypes, it's inaccurate. But I think the freedom movement in Russia, like 30 or 40 years ago, it's a big challenge. I mean, if at the beginning of the Zionist movement in Soviet Union, the thought that probably your grandparents, marched with "Let my people go," right? That were fighting for civil rights and for our ability to go out, right? The Soviet Union. It's almost, full circle. What's happening nowadays in the Russian Federation is scary. My husband went yesterday to demonstrate here in Israel, and in demand to free Navalny. He's an opposition leader that were, they tried to kill him, they tried to put him into jail. The moment he came back to Russia from Germany, he was in hospital there. They arrested him, then arrested his wife. There are hundreds of thousands throughout Russian Federation that were arrested last night because they were, marching and demanding freedom and civil rights, or just freedom. It's a remarkable country with wonderful people that suffers for at least 3 centuries from the same issues. It's painful. I hope that the people who are, again, risking so much, going out and demonstrating, and they're beaten, it's awful. I must tell you that I'm not optimistic. I cannot see any scenario where Putin gives up his power. I hope that there's a crack, that Navalny and those protests creating a crack in the legitimacy of Putin going on and on endlessly. And a crack is through cracks the lights go in. So I don't know. I hope that there will be a better future for my friends and relatives and colleagues that are still in Russia. I also a little scared because the fact that nowadays the Jewish communities in former Soviet Union or in Russia are in relatively good shape, nothing promises the fact that it will go on the same way. Many of my friends during the last few months made Aliyah and came to Israel, because the moment the coronavirus hit Russia, immediately they closed the border, immediately there was another recession in human rights and other freedoms. So Matt, I have nothing very much optimistic to say, but let's hope that, as in the past, Jewish communities all around the world will express solidarity and help and support each other. I'm reading your remarks. If anyone have a question or just something to say out loud, please do. I know this. One of the things that give me a lot of hope is the fact that this is Sunday morning and you are here in this conversation. And the fact that, we still have an interest one for another, and we engage in conversation and thoughts and learning or just connecting. I really want to thank you for doing that. I think as an Israeli, as a Jew, as someone who's connected both to St. Petersburg and Cleveland, this is moving, especially nowadays when we all fed up with Zoom. So thank you, guys. Wait, and I'm back to reading your wonderful comments. Oh. Henry, yes, 20% figure about Russian Israelis. Yes, 20% of the Israeli population. There's another group that is 20% of the Israeli society, which is the Arab Israelis. If you're not familiar, I can send it.
It's 20% of
Sorry?
the Jewish population, though, no?
Yes, exactly.
Population.
Exactly. Exactly. I sent you now in the chat. It's a small excerpt from the 4 tribes speech that President Rivlin made. This is unprecedented. And thank you, Henry, for asking that. What President Rivlin said is that nowadays there's no longer a clear majority or one group that is, this is the Israelis, right? And he pointed out that there are 4 tribes. There's the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, there's the Arab Israelis, there is the traditionalist or the religious Zionist, and there are the secular. And notice that half of the Israeli society doesn't serve the army and is not Zionist, right? The ultra-Orthodox and the Arab Israelis, right? The other half, right? The 2 other tribes, the so-called secular and the religious or Masorti, right? The traditionalists. There's so many subcultures and sub-communities fitting there. The Mizrahi, right? Jews who came from Muslim or Arab countries, Russian speakers, Ethiopian descent, what's happening with the LGBTQ community, etc. So there's like a turmoil now in Israeli society where there are many, many groups who are now demanding for their stories to be heard. Right? The only thing that we did with the 2 stories, like remember when I told you about the putting the flag and the conversion, is just telling our story out loud. But moreover, trying to influence how the Israeli future would look like. And I think it's, wait, I'll send you the link, and then in the meantime, if anyone wants to say, Lisa, we have to finish, right? I'm talking too much.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We'll wrap up in a minute.
Okay, so I just sent out the video.
Is it in the chat?
Yeah, it will be there in a second, of course.
Oh, no problem.
Here it is, I found it.
So Vadim, while you're sending that, I wanted to thank you again for sharing your story. I know it's been really eye-opening and enlightening for me to hear personally. And then just on the whole, YLD is here for everyone, for all of you, as Jewish Cleveland's hub for young Jewish adults. We want to be able to connect. Oh, sorry, my notes go away when the screen is shared. But we want to connect Jewish young adults to each other in the community through social, volunteer, leadership, and philanthropic opportunities. While the way we are creating community has changed in the face of COVID-19, the mission remains the same. If you would like to learn more about YLD and its work, please reach out to Leah Markowitz, YLD's director, at almarkowitz@jcfcleve.org, or Jack Fuchsman at jcfcleve.org. I think it'll be all written in the chat. And also, we are very excited to introduce our new shlicha, Aviv Kanan. Aviv will be arriving in Cleveland in the next 2 weeks. If you would like to meet Aviv, reach out to Jack or Leah, and they will help connect you. And so we also have one more session in this series, and we encourage you all to join us and bring friends. It's next week, Sunday, January 31st, from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And it's about life as a young Jew in Russia, young adults from St. Petersburg. I think the links will all be in the chat, and we hope to see you all next week and hope you have a good rest of your day.
I just wanted to take a minute, first of all, Lisa, to thank you, and to everybody who's on the line. Vadim, I really appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us. I thought this was really remarkable. And I also totally agree with you, the idea that we have all these people on the Zoom when everyone's so fed up with Zoom to really learn about really the story that you shared, that I feel like is the tip of the iceberg of so much we could talk about. Really appreciate it. So thank you, Vadim, and thank you to everybody who's here.